Did a murderous military regime steal the 1978 World Cup? It is a question that has haunted the beautiful game for nearly half a century. A question whispered in the dark corridors of Buenos Aires, buried under decades of denial, and written in the terrified eyes of 11 Peruvian footballers who realized they were no longer playing a game, but negotiating for their lives. June 21, 1978. Estadio Gigante de Arroyito, Rosario, Argentina. A cold, choking fog rolls off the Paraná River, swallowing the stadium lights, turning the pitch into an eerie, blurred stage. Inside the Peruvian dressing room, the silence is deafening. The air is thick with the stinging scent of liniment, sweat, and a cold, unspoken terror. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door flies open. The sound cracks like a pistol shot. In steps General Videla, the ruthless dictator of Argentina. He isn't alone. Flanking him is the towering, unmistakable shadow of U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Videla smiles, but his eyes are pure ice. He doesn't yell. He speaks softly, almost tenderly, about Latin American brotherhood. But as his eyes lock onto each player, the subtext is as clear as a loaded gun pressed against their temples. Minutes later, 11 Peruvian men step onto a pitch surrounded by thousands of screaming fans and hundreds of heavily armed soldiers. They are playing for their survival. To truly comprehend the heist of 1978, you must step back into the blinding horror of the era. 2 years earlier, General Videla's military junta had seized power in Argentina, plunging the nation into a dark, bloody abyss known as the Dirty War. Tens of thousands of citizens, students, journalists, anyone suspected of dissent, were vanishing into thin air. The desaparecidos. They were dragged from their beds in the dead of night, never to be seen again. The regime was bleeding legitimacy. The international community was whispering about boycotts. Videla needed a global cosmetic surgery to wash the blood from his hands. And the 1978 World Cup was his ultimate stage. Cruelly, heartbreakingly. Some of the junta's most notorious secret torture facilities were located just blocks away from the roaring stadiums. While fans cheered for goals, prisoners inside those walls could hear the muffled echoes of the crowd. The junta didn't just want to win. They had to win. Defeat was not an option for the regime. Fast forward to the second group stage. This was an era before synchronized final group matches, a fatal structural flaw in the tournament's design. Through a combination of clever bureaucratic maneuvering and sheer political leverage, the scheduling heavily favored the hosts. Brazil played their final match against Poland hours earlier, walking away with a 3-1 victory. The finality of that whistle set a trap. It handed Argentina the exact blueprint of their destiny. The math for Argentina was suddenly simple, brutal, and seemingly impossible. To leapfrog their bitter Brazilian rivals and punch their ticket to the World Cup final, they had to beat Peru. But they couldn't just win, they had to destroy them. They needed a victory by at least 4 clear goals. Peru was not a pushover. They were a highly disciplined, dangerous side that had already topped their first-round group, boasting legendary talent like Teófilo Cubillas. The world watched, bracing for a classic South American battle. They had no idea the script had already been written. Long before the teams ever walked out of the tunnel, a toxic cloud of paranoia began to settle over the fixture. All eyes, all cameras, and all suspicions were locked onto one man. Peru's goalkeeper, Ramón Quiroga. The twist was a psychological nightmare. Quiroga was a naturalized Peruvian citizen, but he was born and raised right here, in Rosario, Argentina. He was playing against his own blood, under the watchful eye of a murderous regime in his hometown. The Peruvian dressing room was fractured with suspicion. In the days leading up to the match, several Peruvian players, sensing the incoming storm, practically begged their manager to bench Quiroga. They warned him that no matter how honest the goalkeeper was, the optics were a trap. But the manager refused. He insisted Quiroga start. The decision sent a chilling wave through the squad. Was it stubbornness? Or was the coaching staff already operating under orders from higher up? The trap was set, and Quiroga walked out into the stadium fog, carrying the weight of 2 nations on his shoulders. The opening minutes of the match explode with a frantic, desperate energy. Argentina pours forward, fueled by the manic roars of a partisan crowd, but Peru shocks the stadium. They don't lay down. In fact, within the first 15 minutes, Peru hits the post. The stadium holds its breath. The regime's heart skips a beat. But then, the atmosphere changes. A subtle, eerie shift occurs on the pitch. The intensity in the Peruvian defense begins to evaporate, like mist under a morning sun. In the 21st stroke of the clock, Mario Kempes slices through the middle of the pitch. The defense parts like the Red Sea. He scores, 1-0. The crowd erupts, but it's just a tremor compared to what's next. Just before half-time, Alberto Tarantini heads home a second, 2-0. As the players walk off for the break, the Peruvian team looks exhausted, not from running, but from the crushing, invisible weight of the atmosphere. They are only 2 goals away from the abyss. What happened in the second half defies every known law of sporting logic, competitive drive, and human nature. It was a rhythmic, almost hypnotic wave of goals that felt entirely orchestrated from the sidelines. Watch the tape closely. Look at the movement of Peruvian defender Rodolfo Manzo. A man known for his fierce, uncompromising positioning suddenly looks lost, wandering the pitch like a ghost, completely abandoning his defensive assignments. Kempes scores again, 3-0. The stadium is a cauldron of white ticker tape and hysteria. Then, the crucial 4th goal lands. The threshold is met. Argentina has their ticket to the final. But the script doesn't stop running. The momentum is a runaway train. 5. Then 6. René Hausmann slides the final ball into the back of the net. The Peruvian players stand frozen, staring at the grass, while Quiroga picks the ball out of his net for the 6th time. A 6-0 demolition. It wasn't a football match. It was a clinical extraction of a team's will to fight. The final whistle blew, but the real match was just beginning in the shadows of history. The rumors started as a whisper, but over the decades they hardened into terrifying accusations. This wasn't just a sporting fix, it was a geopolitical transaction sealed in blood. Shortly after the tournament concluded, a series of bizarre events occurred. Defender Rodolfo Manzo, who had performed so disastrously on the pitch, was mysteriously transferred to the Argentine club Vélez Sarsfield for a lucrative sum. Decades later, declassified documents and whistleblower testimonies pointed to a much larger, darker trade-off, coordinated under the umbrella of Operation Condor, the alliance of South American military dictatorships. It is alleged that in exchange for the 6-0 scoreline, Argentina shipped 23,000 tons of free grain to Peru. But it didn't stop there. The Argentine central bank reportedly unfroze millions of dollars in Peruvian assets, and Videla's regime agreed to take in several Peruvian political dissidents. The price of a World Cup final was paid in grain, gold, and human lives. A few days later, Argentina would defeat the Netherlands to lift the World Cup trophy. Confetti and ticker tape rained down from the heavens, coating the pitch in a blanket of pure white, masking the dark reality beneath. General Videla smiled from the luxury boxes, handing the trophy to Daniel Passarella. The distraction was complete. The regime had won. But history has a long memory. Today, the 1978 World Cup victory is viewed by many in Argentina with a profound, bittersweet melancholy. The players of that squad fought with magnificent talent, but their legacy will forever be chained to the monsters who pulled the strings from the shadows. The 6-0 match in Rosario remains the beautiful game's most haunting, ugliest masterpiece. It is a stark, eternal reminder of what happens when the theatre of sports is hijacked by the theatre of terror. A heist executed not with tactical genius, but with the suffocating power of bullets, grain, and fear.